Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Gaudete Sunday, when we are called to rejoice this Sunday. Despite the bad news, we should rejoice. And this morning I'm going to repeat for you an article written by Terence Klein. This article appeared in a national magazine, and at this point in time I can't remember which magazine it was, but it was Gaudete Sunday by Terence Klein. You know, sometimes you can join a performance already in progress with little loss, and sometimes you must simply be there when it begins. Back in the 1930s, the CBS radio network produced a series called Mercury Theater on the Air. And on Sunday night, October 31st, 1938, the show's regular theme music played, and an announcement was made that that evening's entertainment would be a live radio production of H.G. Wells' science fiction thriller, The War of the Worlds. Of course, as history records, a great number of people missed the show's opening and prologue, read by its director, Orson Welles. And when they tuned in, the first thing they heard was some dance music on the radio, which was then interrupted by a so-called news bulletin reporting that U.S. scientists had observed odd explosions on the surface of Mars. Not long after, a second interruption reported that a cylindrical object had fallen from the sky onto a farm in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Now you can see where this was going. Soon there was a live news report from Grover's Mill, where police were confronting Martians as they emerged from the cylinder that had fallen from space. As the radio show had no commercial interruptions, latecomers were led to believe that Martians had indeed mounted deadly attacks across the globe, including the release of poisonous gases over New York City. Not surprisingly, real panic was reported all across the United States. It seems hard to believe that modern people could be so gullible, yet someone must read those incredible headlines and purchase the papers on display at checkout stands in the grocery stores this very day. And now, with the rise of Facebook, we have unmistakable evidence of something we have always asserted. People believe what they want to believe. We seem to be at the other end of the same phenomenon. What is it that people want to believe? On the third Sunday of Advent, Gaudete Sunday, the church once again bids us to be joyful, insisting that we have every single reason to rejoice, and we do. Could any prescription be more at odds with the spirit of the times? Indeed, the New York Times has for some time run a regular feature that highlights the good news of this week. However, the headline is small and appears to be just a piece of flotsam in a wave of news that almost by definition always seems to be bad. Why does it seem that the church is swimming upstream, calling us to rejoice, especially on this Sunday? It's okay to tell the kids that we're halfway through Advent, so it's time to be happy and light the rose-colored candle. But given that Advent in the West has virtually ceased to be the penitential season that it once was, the lesson limps just a bit. Of course, the deeper significance of the day is that we are halfway to the coming of Christmas in the Advent calendar, and that parallels our place in the history of salvation itself. We are somewhere in the middle, between the first coming of Christ in poverty, humility, and hiddenness, and his second coming in glory and power. So the church tells us to rest assured and to rejoice. We know how this story will end because our future belongs to Christ, and we can be joyful now, even in the midst of sorrows and troubles. The Lord is near. Have no anxiety at all, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. This, of course, seems to us quite true. Yet the annual proclamation, like the modern holiday season itself, seems to blithely ignore those who are suffering greatly at this time because of death, a diagnosis, a divorce, a natural disaster, or any one of the sundry crimes against humanity reported every single day in our media. It may well be correct to command joy, but isn't it also at this time in the world just a bit callous? I've spent quite a good time in my life studying philosophical questions about God, and I think it's safe to say, and it may be the only proposition that all of us in this area of concern can agree upon, that no one produces philosophical arguments for or against the existence of God that convince everyone who encounters them. Those suffering the most, if they commit themselves to personal prayer, will hit water before the rest of us do. No need to rehearse them here. It's my purpose to share a personal experience. I often follow an argument for or against God's existence in its very end and say, that indeed is convincing, yet arguments for the existence of God are not particularly useful when troubles come our way. And those convincing arguments about God being a delusion themselves dissipate when I come to private prayer and simply know myself to be in the presence of God, who is to me an old friend. I don't think that we're meant to prove God as we would any other fact about the world. I think we were created to meet God, to encounter God's presence, and this can happen only in prayer. It is the same with joy. It's to be found in silent, private prayer. Pick your favorite place, your favorite text, your best time of the day or week, and slip away to be alone with God. Try to open yourself for His presence and make yourself weak and vulnerable by yearning for God at all times. Many of you know that I was born and raised in Kansas. And in the driest parts of Kansas, we know that if we keep digging long enough, we'll sooner or later hit water. The same is true of joy when we commit ourselves to prayer. St. Ignatius Loyola once speculated that if the Holy Father were to dissolve his beloved Jesuits, it would take him no more than a quarter of an hour in prayer to recover and to think no more upon it. Oddly enough, those suffering the most, if they commit themselves to personal prayer, just like those of us in Kansas who dig long enough, will hit water before the rest of us. Remember, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those whose spirit is crushed. But why is bad news so much easier to credit than the good? Even a Martian invasion, as we talked about in the beginning. Remember, we believe what we want to believe, what we have come to expect. Does joy, rejoicing for the asking, seem too hard to believe on this Gaudete Sunday, the Sunday that means rejoice? It won't seem so difficult if you pray. Amen. Remember to let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.